Oh yeah, welcome to the Intuitive Empire. I'm your host, Jaya Rose, and we can finally get started because you are here. And if you are ready to energetically align with your desires, own your innate magic, and step powerfully into your spiritual leadership, well, love, you're in the right place. Let's do the damn thing already. Welcome to the Intuitive Empire podcast. I feel a little bit nervous. This is kind of funny because I normally don't. And I just hit record and I was like, oh, I'm kind of just going to make myself do it. And it's actually not surprising because of the topic, which is impactful storytelling for soulful entrepreneurs. Because of course we teach what we need to learn or we teach what we have learned. And one of the things that I have focused a lot on in my business is storytelling. And I did it very intentionally, but not without resistance. In fact, when I first learned about the power of storytelling, I really didn't know anything about it. I had been an entrepreneur already for over 10 years, and I had no idea that telling my story was so powerful. And when I learned that this is something not only that I could do to build my business online, but that really I should. It's some of the most common advice you'll hear. Am I right? You're like, what is the number one thing you need to do to grow an audience, to build know, like, and trust, to create authority in your niche? Tell your story. And you just get drilled with it. And I remember when I first started hearing it, I was like, okay, well, what the heck does that even mean? Okay, so like my original story, like just a random story, what story are we talking about here? And I really didn't understand for a long time until I started seeing it modeled. I started watching people, and it almost was like a magic spell, I felt, when I would see people coming on to live video or doing a masterclass or speaking on stage. And I would just be mesmerized and so drawn into their story. But I still didn't feel like I understood what they were doing. Like, there just felt like there was no rhyme or reason to it until I got asked to speak at an event. I actually got asked to keynote an event in Canada, which meant I would have a 45-minute slot of time. And of course, I was going to need to tell my story. And I actually was like, what the heck? What am I going to do? I don't know. And I hired somebody, which I highly recommend. Okay. I want to share with you at the beginning of this, like just before I get too deep into teaching you, that I have invested a lot of time, energy, and money into learning how to share my story, learning how to speak on stage, and how to really create relevancy and share my message in a powerful way. A lot. I have invested so much. And because of that, I feel like it's important for me to put it all together and sort of like show you what I've found. At the time, I hired a coach one-on-one to meet with me and help me in like a 4-hour intensive, put my story together. And it was a very smart thing to do because when I did that, then I knew how to put my story together. I knew how to put a whole talk together. And little did I know, in that year coming up, I would speak at 6 events for my first year of speaking. And I knew that storytelling was the crux of it. I felt comfortable, like just talking. I felt comfortable in the performance because I had been a belly dancer on stage for 20 years. Oh my gosh, 15 years at least at that point. And those things felt comfortable to me. But it was the story part that was like, do people really care? What stories are relevant? How do I know if they care? And I didn't want to feel like I was just talking about myself, because a lot of times when I go to events and I see people sharing their story and they're not very seasoned in terms of how much speaking they've done. I'm just going to be real. There's an element of like, you're just telling this story because this is what you think you should tell. You're just telling this story because someone else told you to. You're just telling this story because you think that we all care about you. And I know that that sounds mean because, of course, we care about you. But as the speaker, it is not the audience's job to care about you. It is not. And so I'm going to dive in to what I've learned. And I'm also going to really lay out a beautiful invitation for you. I'm doing 2 workshops called Impactful Storytelling, one in Portland, Oregon, and one online. And they are both under $100 to attend these workshops. And in the workshop, I'm going to break down for you my 6-phase framework for identifying the stories that are the most valuable to you, how to put it together in a really meaningful way, how to tie it into your core message, how to identify what the core message is that's relevant to either the audience, to the type of stage you're on. And by stage, I want you to know that social media is a stage. When you do a Facebook post, that's a stage. Instagram, an Instagram story, your email list, your website, a video recorded or live, a podcast interview, your own podcast, or literally on stage. All of those things are a stage. All of those things are an opportunity for you to share your story. But if you don't know what story to tell, or if you do know what story to tell, but you don't know how to put it together in a way that's really meaningful for other people, or you know how to put it together that's meaningful for other people, but you don't know how to tie it into your core message, or you don't know what your core message is, any of those things, this will answer all of that for you. So I'll go into a little more detail at the end, but I did put the information in the show notes for you. I highly recommend grabbing your seat. And oh my gosh, just before I dive into all the juicy content here, tonight is Bachelor Monday. Okay, not gonna lie, if you've read anything from me, you know I love The Bachelor. And I'm about to get my laptop, lay on the couch, watch The Bachelor, and create a really amazing bonus freebie for signing up for this workshop. And it's called the Ultimate Impactful Storytelling Checklist. I don't remember the name because I just created it today, and it's the top 10 things you need to do to mentally prepare, energetically prepare, and physically prepare to be on stage. Like I mentioned, any of those stages. It's super valuable, and that'll just be a bonus that you get right away. So without further ado, I'll dive into why, like what the heck this is all about. So the impactful storytelling framework was born out of really what I was telling you about, like sort of in a way forced to figure it out. If you're going to be speaking on stage, 6 times in a year, well, you got to figure it out, right? And then what happened, of course, the ball continued rolling, and I've spoken on stage a lot more than that and shared my story on a lot of different platforms. And what I found is that ultimately, there is a framework. And I love this because you don't have to shoot in the dark. There's no reason that you have to just be wondering what's relevant. How do I do it? How do I put it together? How do I not just talk about myself, or is it too vulnerable? There are a few things that I want you to keep in mind, okay? I'm going to lay a few things out for you here, and then I'm going to invite you to come to my workshop so that you can really dive in and get all the juicy details. Deal? Okay, so the first thing I want to point out is that you really need to be fully healed from the story. Now, everybody talks about vulnerability. I love Brené Brown's work on vulnerability. I love the idea that courage comes from vulnerability. It is so true. And this goes hand in hand with storytelling. So being vulnerable has all the hype online, especially. Be vulnerable. Everybody's going to love you. That's how they're going to be attracted to you. Well, yes, and you need to be vulnerable, but you don't want to be in the story. And so this is just really important. And I think that, like, I'm guessing you probably already know this. This is going to be intuitive to you, that you have to have healed. But there are things that come up, like, for example, if you're going to tell a story that comes from your childhood, okay? So for me, my parents got divorced when I was 5. There's a lot of stuff that went on during that time that imprinted in me that I have needed to heal as an adult. and that I could tell a number of stories around, including my online business being such a catalyst for healing around abandonment and self-acceptance and self-love because of the direct, what do I want to say? The direct, I want to say like creation, but it's like imprint, the direct imprint of having my dad and mom split up and my whole life change at that young age of 5. And then my dad actually moved away. We lived in Indiana. And within a year, so by the time I was 6, he moved to New York. And we saw him, we meaning my sister and I, who's 2 years older than me, just once a year. We would go visit him. And then we also would see him a couple other times a year, like Thanksgiving and maybe a birthday. Dramatic change. And there have been so many times in my life where I've known that that created some stuff for me, like in marriages and therapy. And I'm, like I've healed it. And yet there's still new stuff that comes up. So it's really important to recognize, where am I in terms of healing in this story? Because getting in front of people and sharing your story, while it does heal you, it does. I will be the first to say that storytelling is all about healing, because it's going to heal you to share it, right? There's nothing more powerful than actually getting off your chest, opening up and sharing things that maybe you've hidden, and really coming to like truth around what those things are. And it's also incredibly healing for your audience. And that's really the whole point, is for your audience to recognize themselves in your story. So this level of mastery and healing that you have is very important, because it's going to help you be the bearer of this message, be the bearer of the story in a way that, yeah, it's your story. Yeah, it happened to you. But you are not that person anymore, right? Like, I'm not that hurt 5-year-old. I am a grown woman who has healed her inner child on a lot of levels, and I'm able to carry that message forward. And so this is a really important thing when you're picking the stories that you're going to tell. There can be impactful stories that are from childhood. There can be impactful stories that are from teenage or young adulthood, or from recent. There is nothing wrong with getting on stage and telling a story that happened recently if it qualifies your message. If the point of telling it is for your audience to resonate with you and for it to qualify, I hope you know what I mean when I say that. Qualify your message, meaning that it's speaking life into your message, and it's telling everybody that you are the only one that could share this, because your story validates that message. Okay. So that's what I want you to understand. And what happens is that when you tell a story, it's not about everybody understanding you. And this is what happens so commonly. I have seen this on stage a million times, the dreaded timeline, the timeline of events, as if the people in the audience give a shit. Okay, let's be honest. Nobody cares about the timeline of your life. That's just boring because it's linear. And stories are not linear. Nothing about our lives are linear. So when we're going forward into, well, then I was 5 and my dad left and I sort of adopted some of these abandonment issues. And later down the road, X, Y, and Z happened. And then I moved, right? You're just like, really? Like, literally, it feels like I'd be dragging you along. Now, nobody wants that. You want to be in it. Like, you want to be in my story with me and feel like I'm carrying you through it. And I have a direction. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. And this is, like I said, one thing, it takes the awareness and the understanding. I'm hoping that you're getting a lot out of this right now. And if you have done this before, you won't do it again because you heard me say this. But also, it takes practice and time. I would never suggest that somebody tell their story for the first time when they have not practiced being a speaker, they have not practiced telling a story in public, and just get on stage and share it. I think there are very, very few instances where that would be impactful. Now, it's not, of course, across the board, because of course there could be a time when that could be impactful. And most of the time it's not going to be, because it's an art and it's important to practice this. So the number one tip was that you're healed around your story. Number two is that you do not tell it in a linear fashion, that you pick a story again, whether it be from childhood or from young adulthood or from a recent time, and understand that people don't need all the backstory and they don't need all the story. You don't need to take them from childhood to where you are now for them to be on board with you. And this is the thing that happens so commonly. And I want you just to give your storytelling ability and your ability to be powerful in your presence some credit. Give it credit because it needs that. And it's so much more valuable than you think. Just your ability to be vulnerable, just your ability to stand on, again, whatever stage we're talking about, just your ability to show up in your truth is impactful for people. And a lot of times, really more often than not, less is more. Less is more. And so I love to teach everything about storytelling, about spirituality, personal growth, with this idea of a zoom in, zoom out effect. So knowing that you have the ability to zoom in on your life at any time. And a lot of us live in a very zoomed in way, and we get stressed out about the little things that are happening in our life, right? Well, you can look at stories this way too. So it's not that you have to be stressed out, but the zoom in is actually really valuable. It's probably more impactful for somebody to zoom all the way in and you tell them about an instance of the story and how you felt. Maybe it's about the breakdown and you really walk them through. And that way, when you talk about the breakthrough and what you've now embodied, you have so much power and authority, and you didn't need to give them all the backstory that took you getting there. Like, what if instead you got on stage and you qualified your audience and you said, does anyone here relate to hitting rock bottom? Let's see a show of hands. And obviously a lot of people raise their hands. And you say, great. How about, is there anybody who hit that rock bottom and then realized they needed to go in an entirely different direction than they were going in? And of course, right, maybe less people raise their hands, but still a lot. And then the final thing, and is there anybody who feels like they've gotten to where they are literally by the grace of God, and if they were not in a co-creation, they don't have any idea how they would have gotten there? And everyone raises their hand. And right there, like a very like masculine old stereotype of how you tell a story, you'd have to start at the beginning, right? Well, because when I was, no, like you have everybody. And what if in that moment you just said, well, me too. Imagine this. I was 29, sitting on the floor of my kitchen crying. I had been crying for 3 days in a row at this point. Every day I'd come home from work, I would sit on the kitchen floor and I would cry all night long. And then everyone's like, whoa, what the heck? Right? But they have you, or you have them rather. That's what you want. You want to have them. You want to show them that you're going to take them through the journey. How much more compelling and impactful is that? And now granted, you're going to take them through the journey, right? And then you're going to take them through the ups and you're going to say, and this is how I got here. And now here I am on this live video. Here I am on this stage. Here I am on this podcast, sharing this story with you, knowing that if I hadn't gone through all of that, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be where I am. Now I want you to think about for you in your life, and then we flip it on them and we go right into our message. Here's my core message. Maybe my message is like, it takes going to the bottom to rise to the top. That's actually so good, isn't it? So it takes, and so right there, I'm going to like nail it in right then. And it takes going to the bottom to get to the top. Anyone here interested in going all the way to the top? I've got you. Let's go through my 5 steps to elevating your business and life and never looking back. And they're like, oh my God, right? I trust you so much because I know that you cried on the floor for 3 days in a row and hit rock bottom and you pulled yourself up. They don't need to know anything else about you. They don't need to know X, Y, and Z, timeline, blah, blah, blah. And this is the thing. Here's what the power is in this. They see themselves. It is not about you. It is not about your breakdown because you're healed from that and you were able to be the vehicle for that. It is about the message that you lead them to. Isn't it so fun? Oh, so good. So these are some tips I want you to really get into. Is like, what are some of the stories that are impactful that validate my message? Now, if you don't know your message, I want to give you one more tip here. It's that you don't have to. Over the last, let's see, I started speaking 3 years ago. It might even only be 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I'm going to find out for you. But it's been this really beautiful journey, and I didn't know where it was going to lead. And I didn't have to in order to get to where I am. So what I want you to understand is that it isn't really about knowing what the message is the whole time, because my message has changed over these last few years. And there's been one keynote speaking event where my message was believe in yourself. There's been another where my message was miracles exist. Another where it's important to know your message, like it's important to share your message with the world. Another where it was about the lifestyle that you need to have in order to really live your big dreams. All different, right? But I have a story that can hold those things up, that can validate each one of those messages. And I know what those stories are, and I know how to tell them. And so if you feel like, oh, I have to know exactly what my message is, you don't. You really don't. I actually think about the story sometimes first, and I'll think, I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story about when I went to group couples therapy alone. It's a really awesome story. And there's a number of different directions I can go with it, but that's the story I want to tell. So you don't have to have it all figured out, but what you need to understand is the framework. Because the thing about practice is that it's really awesome, but it's also a little bit dangerous, because if you practice something that isn't actually serving you, then you get good at it, and then you actually have to unlearn it. So I want you to throw everything that you've been doing around storytelling out the window if it's not working for you. I mean, please do what's working. Always do what's working. But if you haven't started with telling your story, or if you haven't practiced yet, or if you've practiced or you've even spoken on stage, but you're noticing some red flags with some of the stuff I'm saying, I have the perfect thing for you. It is learning the 6-phase framework for impactful storytelling. Because when you learn it, then you can practice. You can practice on a live video. You can practice in the mirror. You can practice it with a group of friends. You can practice, and nail it. So that whatever your platform is that you're wanting to share your story more, whether it be writing, whether it be speaking, whether it be audio through podcasts like this, you have a foundation, and you also understand you have your story archives where you're like, this, it's like a story bank, right? And then you're like, I know what my stories are. The reality is you're not going to be making stories up. You need to understand that your life is broken down in stories and to pick which ones are valuable. So that's the first thing we're going to do in the framework, is pick which stories are valuable to you. And I'm going to teach you how it doesn't matter which story it is, you're going to go through the same framework, because you're going to arrive at the same destination. And that destination is your core message. And if you don't know what your core message is, I'm going to teach you how to surmise. So like I took you through that little example that I literally made up right then about rock bottom, qualifying the audience who's been at the rock bottom, right? Well, I'm going to teach you that you have to go low to go high, right? And you're like, oh my God, that's awesome. Well, the only reason I can do that on the spot right now is because I've done it a million times. And so I'm going to teach you how to do it, because even though it's not just one thing you say that's powerful, right? There's so many things. You don't have to just say one thing that makes everybody swoon and now all of a sudden it was impactful. But I will tell you that having these sort of mic drop moments are really great. They're so good, and they anchor you. It's really important to have some anchors. Again, no matter what even if it's just a post you're writing. It's important to have anchors. And so I'm going to teach you how to do all of this in my impactful storytelling workshop. And I just would love for you to come. I don't really have that much more to say about it because I feel like I talked about it quite enough. But if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, or you want to start a business, I would say this is the most powerful thing to learn. It's probably the smartest thing that I have invested my time, energy, and money into, because I can get on stage, share my story powerfully, tie it into a message, and tie that message into an offer that makes sense, and create a business. You know what I mean? Grow a business that is aligned with me and that core message, and really get out there and share it in a big way. I mean, hey, impactful storytelling. What else are we talking about here? So I'm going to put the links below. If you're in Portland, Oregon, I would love to meet you live. I have room for about 30 people in a workshop. I am doing an online version. It's going to be a 90-minute version, but you don't even have to come live, because guess what? I'm going to record it and I'm going to break it down into modules for you with workbooks. Like, I'm going to hook it up. I don't know if you've ever taken anything from me before, but I will hook it up. And the benefit of being there live is that we will have a Q&A at the end. And because this is coming out tomorrow, the ultimate guide, the ultimate impactful storytelling checklist to go through these 10 things to help you get your energy right, your mindset right, and your physical body prepared to deliver this story that is so great and impactful. I'm so excited to help you with this. I really have a vision of women doing their work, healing themselves and showing up in the world, powerfully telling their stories and healing other people, and growing profitable, purpose-led businesses along the way. That's what I'm here for. And this is my contribution. So I would love to have you. Please check out the links below. And if this was valuable for you, take a screenshot, put it on Instagram, find me, the Jaya Rose. Tag me. I will put you into my story and give you a shout out. If you do a video shout out, bonus points. Talk about your own story, because that's a big part of this. We don't just learn how to share our story to keep it to ourselves, right? This is about sharing and making the biggest impact we can. So let's do it on social media. Connect with me, and I would love to see that you were listening to this. If you sign up for the workshop, take a screenshot, send it to me on Instagram too. I'd love to see. And I'm just really excited to support you on helping you dive into your impactful stories and getting out there and doing the transformational work that you know you're meant to do. All right, love. I'm so happy you were here, and I'll see you next time on the Intuitive Empire.